It's spring, March Madness is upon us, and I just got back from the GAMA trade show with a lot of great new games and accessories that will be coming your way very soon, all to show you on this episode of Geek Room Update. Hello Internet, I'm Jason, and I'm the owner here at the Geek Room Hobbies and Games in Omaha, Nebraska. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Geek Room Update. On today's show, we're going to be going over a lot of the great news that I brought back from the GAMA trade show a couple of weeks ago, which includes some great new and expanded product lines you'll be seeing here at the Geek Room soon, as well as some exciting new in-store play opportunities. And maybe, by the end of the show, we'll even have a little bit of a hint about an upcoming sale next month. But before we get into the GAMA news, I did want to talk just a little bit about something else. As you know, it is March, and several things happen at this time every year, like the vernal equinox and the first day of spring, the switch to daylight savings time, and of course, March Madness, the annual NCAA basketball championship tournament. Now, as you probably know, we are next door neighbors to the Good Life, one of the biggest and most popular sports bars here in Omaha. And March Madness is undeniably one of the biggest and certainly one of the longest lasting sporting events that happen every year. Now, because of the tournament and all of the people that are watching it at the Good Life, it has caused a little bit of parking congestion for us here at our plaza. We will still be keeping our normal business hours all throughout the tournament, as well as our regularly scheduled events on the weekends still will be happening. However, you might notice that some of the neat new things that I'm going to announce today conspicuously take place after the tournament is over, and that's because of the parking congestion. Now, we are working with the management company for the shopping plaza here to see if there's anything we can do to alleviate the congestion of parking for some of our customers. But in the meantime, if you are heading down to the Geek Room, you might want to allow just a little bit of extra time to try and find a parking spot. If you are having trouble finding a parking spot in our main east lot, you should know that there is a limited amount of parking that is on the south side of the other building here in the plaza in the alleyway between our shopping mall and the school next door. And we'd like to apologize for any inconvenience that this might cause some of our customers, and I would like to personally thank everyone who did brave the March Madness crowds to come down and support our store this past weekend. Well, now that we have all of that silly sports ball stuff out of the way, let's get to talking about some real games. Now, if you watched the last episode of Geek Room Update, or if you follow our Facebook page, then you know that I was recently in Reno, Nevada at the 2019 GAMA trade show. GAMA, if you don't know, is the Game Manufacturers Association, which doesn't really actually spell gamma, but it is a trade organization of game distributors, publishers, and retailers like me, and their annual trade show is a chance for us to all get together and learn about all of the great new stuff that is coming out over the next year. It was 5 very informative, fun, and exhausting days in Reno, but we found a lot of great stuff for our customers, so we're going to take a break from our usual format on Geek Room Update, where we normally talk about stuff that is available pretty much right now or in the very near future, to talk about some of the stuff that will be coming throughout the rest of the year here to the Geek Room that we learned about at GAMA. So let's get the GAMA news started off with War Games. There was a lot of great stuff to see for War Games at GAMA. Every major publisher was represented. There were, however, 2 presentations for War Games that I wanted to share with you, because we will be carrying both of them when their new editions hit in June. One is a game that is a brand new game to the Geek Room, and the other will be a massive expansion of a war game that we already carry. Now, the game that we will be adding brand new to our stock in June is Flames of War. If you're not familiar with Flames of War, it is a 15mm scale World War II historical combat game. Now, this June, to coincide with the anniversary of the D-Day invasion, which of course marks the entry of the Americans into the European theater, as well as the start of what people refer to as the late war period, Battlefield Miniatures is bringing the late war to their 4th edition version of Flames of War. And it is a big release in June for Flames of War. First of all, they're going to be releasing 2 brand new starter sets. The first one, which is a smaller starter set, is called Fury, and it will feature 5 15mm tanks representing both Germans and Americans that will give you kind of a taste for what the Flames of War game is like if you've never played it before. The larger of the 2 starter sets is called Hit the Beach, and this is a larger, more comprehensive, traditional style starter set. It will contain not only tank miniatures, but infantry and artillery. Both starter sets will contain a mini rule book, dice, data cards for the units, as well as an assembly guide for the models. Now, in addition to those 2 German versus American starter sets, Flames of War will also be releasing 4 army boxes, one for each of the 4 major nations that participated in the European theater. These new boxes will contain not only a lot more miniatures, but a full rulebook, assembly instructions, and data cards for the units that are consistent with both Fortress Europe and the upcoming D-Day books that we'll be releasing. Now, before the big D-Day release of all the miniatures and starter sets, there will be 2 other Flames of War releases in May. One is a new late war version of the 4th edition rulebook. The other big one is a new edition of the Colors of War book, which is a painting guide so that you can make historically accurate miniatures. In addition to that, they will be releasing new Colors of War paint bundles, which return to using the Vallejo model color line. Again, Flames of War is coming to the Geek Room. We'll probably be having some organized play stuff as well when that gets started, but you can pick up the new rulebook, Colors of War, and paint bundles in May, and all of the great new miniatures for Flames of War Late War starting in June. The other big war game that we'll be seeing a big release this summer is Malifaux 3rd Edition. If you're not familiar with Malifaux, Malifaux is a steampunk / gothic horror inspired skirmish games published by Weird Games. Word games, wired games, weird games, one of those is right. Now, one of the things that I love most about Malifaux, besides the absolutely gorgeous sculpts and high quality they always have for their miniatures, is the unique mechanic that they have for random number generation. Instead of using dice like most conventional games, they use what is referred to as a fate deck, which is essentially a deck of playing cards that you use to determine your rolls that you would determine in other games. One of the new things for 3rd edition is they're actually increasing the size of the fate decks, and they will now be tarot card sized, and that will also come with some new sleeves from Weird Games so that you can keep your fate decks protected. Now, Weird is going out of their way to make the upgrade from 2nd edition Malifaux to 3rd edition Malifaux as painless as possible for everyone. They're doing things like making all of the updated data cards for crews available for free online, so you can keep your existing crew updated to 3rd edition. Also, while there will be a physical copy of the new rulebook that will be available in stores, they're making the 3rd edition rules available online completely free in PDF form. Weird will also be releasing 7 faction books over the course of the year. Now, we do currently stock 2nd edition Malifaux, but we have a very small selection because it was at the end of that edition's life cycle. But we are going to be massively expanding what we carry for Malifaux, not only just the miniatures and the faction books, but we will also be carrying some of their fantastic looking Weird Scapes terrain for use not only in Malifaux but in any other war game you might want to play. I am super excited about all of the new stuff that is coming to the Geek Room for Malifaux. I know I went through it kind of quick, but I think I got everything that they wanted me to mention. Let me look here. Oh yeah, they're adding an 8th faction. Let's move on to role-playing game news. Now, I'm an old-school role-playing gamer. I grew up in the golden age of role-playing games in the mid-'80s, and if you've ever perused our role-playing game section here at the store, you'll know that I have a particular love for new editions of older games. We have things here like Call of Cthulhu, RuneQuest, Shadowrun. We even have the original West End Games version of the Star Wars role-playing game. But back in the day, when there was a role-playing game for virtually any taste, and AD&D First Edition ruled supreme, there were a few role-playing game releases that, when they came out, hit the gaming world like a nuclear bomb. One of the biggest and most influential, and certainly one of my all-time favorites, was Cyberpunk 2020. Cyberpunk 2020 is published by Artelosian Games and is obviously, because of the title, a cyberpunk role-playing game. Now, they didn't coin the term cyberpunk, but they do own the copyright to it, so all of the other blank punk things you have ever heard of, particularly steampunk, does sort of owe its existence, at least in terminology, to this iconic role-playing game. Now, I had a chance to stop by the Artelosian booth at GAMA and talk with them a little bit, and they have a new version of Cyberpunk getting ready to come out soon called Cyberpunk Red, which admittedly is a really cool name, and they probably had to change it because when you think about it, calling a futuristic sci-fi role-playing game Cyberpunk 2020 in 2019 doesn't exactly scream future. The other reason they are changing the edition is because in the 30-plus years since the original version came out, technology in the real world has advanced in ways they couldn't have foreseen. And frankly, things like physically jacking into a computer system with a physical cable also don't exactly seem futuristic to those of us in the 21st century. So of course, to reflect the real-world advances in technology, they're advancing the lore of the game and the world to reflect things that have happened like facial recognition technology, gestures, touch screens, wireless networks, and those sorts of things. But the other, and perhaps bigger reason for the new edition has to do with Cyberpunk 2077. Now, if you're not familiar with it, Cyberpunk 2077 is a highly anticipated upcoming video game RPG from CD Projekt Red, the makers of the extremely popular and successful Witcher video games. Cyberpunk Red is intended to be a bridge between the world of Cyberpunk 2020 and the world of Cyberpunk 2077. Now, I did ask Roleplaying Games if they were going to do something to coincide with the launch of Cyberpunk 2077. Their response was that they couldn't really get into specifics because a lot of things are needed to be kept secret, but they did give me a hint that because of how the contract between the two companies worked out, after Cyberpunk 2077 has been out for a while, most likely Roleplaying Games will do something that will bring the tabletop role-playing game into the world of the video role-playing game. But since it is widely expected that Cyberpunk 2077 will not drop until later on this year or the early part of next year, those supplements for Cyberpunk Red are probably a couple of years away. So there's not a ton of information publicly available about Cyberpunk Red at this point, although Roleplaying did say to expect more announcements coming soon, perhaps maybe even at Gen Con this summer. However, I'm really excited about a new version of Cyberpunk. It is, in my opinion, one of the best all-time role-playing games, one of the most creative universes, and certainly one of my favorites. We will definitely be carrying it in store when it releases, and as soon as we know more about any specifics regarding Cyberpunk Red, we will be sure to pass them on to you as quickly as we can. Moving on to board games, there was literally a metric ton of board games that you could try out and preview at GAMA this year. So many that it was frankly overwhelming and hard to try and keep up with all of them. However, there were two that I did manage to see in playtest that I was really impressed by and that we will be getting in store that I wanted to share with you. Now, 2019, if you did not know, is the 150th anniversary of the periodic table of elements. In fact, the United Nations has declared this year the International Year of the Periodic Table of Elements. In celebration of this monumental anniversary, the good folks at Genius Games will be releasing a new game that centers on everybody's second least favorite part about high school. And that game is Periodic. In Periodic, players maneuver across the periodic table trying to land on specific elements to collect goal cards or land on element groups to score points. The game features a scientifically accurate and absolutely gorgeous pastel version of the periodic table of elements as the game board, as well as high-quality wooden playing pieces. Periodic is made by Genius Games, a company known for combining fun gameplay, legitimate educational value, and science in such games as Ion, Cytosis, and Subatomic. You can pick up your copy of Periodic as well as play it for free out of our games library when it releases in July. Now, one of the board games that was really blowing up at GAMA was a game called Tiny Towns. In fact, the Tiny Towns demo booth was so packed that it was frankly hard to actually be able to sit down and play a demo. In Tiny Towns, you are the mayor of a tiny town in the forest. In this forest, the smaller creatures of the world have created a civilization safe from predators. This land is small and resources are scarce, so you have to make the most of the resources at hand. The game is a city building resource management strategy game in which you compete against other players to see if you can build the most buildings on a 4x4 city grid with the resources available. The most mind-boggling part of Tiny Towns is that the game publisher claims that given enough copies of the game, and presumably a large enough dining room table, you actually can play a game of Tiny Towns simultaneously, one game with 1,000 players. In fact, the website for the game officially lists the number of players for this board game as 1 to unlimited. Tiny Towns, of all the games we are mentioning this week, will actually be here the soonest as it is releasing in April. Lastly, we have CCG news. Now, if you are a big CCG gamer or you keep a close eye on game news, then you probably know that for the world of customizable and trading card games, the big news coming out of GAMA was the radical change made by Wizards of the Coast to their Wizards Play Network organized play system for Magic the Gathering. Now, the new WPN significantly alters the way in which the Wizards Play Network evaluates stores, as well as how stores get their allocations for things like pre-releases and Friday Night Magic exclusives. Now, because we're still pretty new and our Magic community is still pretty small, you won't see much of a noticeable effect for the new WPN on stuff here at the Geek Room, other than it might actually delay our ability to start Friday Night Magic as quickly as we had hoped. But that's okay, because there is some other great news for CCGs coming to the Geek Room, including some expanded organized play opportunities. If you regularly watch the Geek Room, or if you've ever talked to me about card games in the store, then you will undoubtedly know that I'm a big fan of Keyforge, the new card game from Fantasy Flight Games and Magic creator Richard Garfield. Now, of course, the main reason why I was so excited about Keyforge stuff at GAMA was because of these. These are official, sealed, and completely usable and legal Keyforge decks manufactured by Fantasy Flight Games that are not only labeled as GAMA trade show exclusives, but also are branded for the Geek Room. Now, every store who participated in GAMA and registered by a certain date was given 12 of these decks. These two happen to be mine, and I pulled them out just because I like the names. This one here is Castro, the Mortician of the Geek Room, and this one over here is the Turbulent Cat of the Geek Room. But we have 10 others whose titles and contents I am keeping secret for now, because we're setting them aside for a very secret and special reason, which coincidentally also leads us into our section about in-store gaming. On Saturday, April 13th, after this whole sports ball thing that everybody next door is so crazy for is over, we will be having our very first ever in-store Keyforge tournament. The tournament will be limited to 10 players and will have a small entry fee, but for that entry fee, you are going to get 2 different Keyforge decks. You will get one regular, unopened, sealed Keyforge Call of the Archons booster deck, as well as one of the Geek Room branded booster decks. And you can use either deck you want throughout the tournament. Other than that, it will be just like any other standard sealed deck tournament that you might have competed in before. Now, we're still finalizing a few of the details, specifically what time on Saturday we will be holding the tournament, and we will have more posted on our Facebook page coming up this week. So keep an eye out on that, or check back here for our next episode in 2 weeks, where we will obviously have more information as far as the time and the exact entry fee for you then. Now, I spent time at GAMA talking to all of the big publishers of card games about organized play in store, and out of all of them, there was one company that was by far the most supportive and the most helpful and spent the most time sitting down with me to develop a roadmap for organized play, and that is, of course, the good folks at the Pokemon Company. Which is why I am happy to announce that we are deep in the process of getting an official Pokemon League going here at the store. We already have a couple of Pokemon professors, one of whom is a league organizer, lined up for the store, so we're just in the process of getting the Geek Room approved as a physical location for the league, and then we'll be ready to go. This is something that we're hoping to have started by the end of the spring so that we can roll it out when the kids are available during summertime for league play. So if you are a big fan of Pokemon, or you've been looking for more opportunities to play collectible card games here at the store, please keep an eye out, because we will have more information on the upcoming Pokemon League soon. And one other thing about Pokemon in our store, we've never really promoted before. And kind of the neat thing about it being our first CCG organized play. When you play in the Pokemon League here in our store, you can actually, believe it or not, play 2 different Pokemon games at exactly the same time. As it turns out, the 2 giant lighted pillars in our east parking lot are in fact a Pokestop for Pokemon Go. And yes, if you are inside of our store sitting at our gaming tables, you are within range of that Pokestop to be able to collect Pokemon. So you can actually be sitting in our store beating Pokemon with your Pokemon in the Pokemon TCG while catching Pokemon in Pokemon Go. Pokemon. Gotta catch them all. So we are really excited for the expansion of Pokemon here at the store. I'm really looking forward to it. In addition to the organized play, you can also expect our product selection for Pokemon to increase dramatically in the near future, to include things like Elite trainer boxes, theme decks, boosters, as well as card accessories like card protectors, binders, and deck boxes. Again, keep an eye out here for more information about Pokemon, and we should have something for you in the very, very near future. One last piece of in-store gaming news and our only non-GAMA related item this episode. On Friday, March 29th, starting at 6 p.m., we will be hosting some Axis and Allies play here in the store. Axis and Allies is, of course, the iconic World War II strategy board game, and we will be hosting two different versions. One will be the 1940 Europe 2nd edition version, and the other will be the new Axis and Allies and Zombies edition that came out last fall. We'll even have people here to show you how to play if you are new to the game or a little bit rusty. Also, for you A&A fans out there, if you would like to join us but you want to bring a different edition of the game, such as the main box set or the Pacific 1940 edition, feel free to do so. Again, we'll be starting next Friday at 6 p.m. and running until the world is safe for democracy, or 1 a.m., whichever comes first. Now, in order to make room for all this new stuff that we've got coming, on the first weekend after the end of the sports ball tournament, we will be having a big spring cleaning sale. That sale will be April 12th through the 14th, and you will be able to save between 10 and 40% on select products here in the store. You'll even still be able to use your discount cards to get an extra 15% off on top of that. So we can't really tell you much more because, at the risk of sounding like a used car salesman, I literally am forbidden from disclosing to you exactly how much we're going to give off on certain games, but it's going to be quite a bit of saving. There will be more information about the sale on Facebook coming soon. And of course, you can tune in to the next episode of Geek Room Update, and we will have all of the details for you then. So if you are a regular viewer of Geek Room Update, then you'll have probably noticed at this point that this episode is a little bit different from some of the others. You see, this time I went out of my way to pick specific examples and news items to avoid having to mention a certain British miniature company. And we did it. We did it. We actually went one whole episode without... Hey. Damn it! Yeah. Just once, I would like to go one whole episode where I do not have to mention... Fine. They had a lot of big releases and made a lot of news last week at GAMA, and we'll get to all of it in time next week. We'll talk about it all. The Chaos Space Marines, Kill Team Elites, Warcry. We'll even go over Warhammer branded products like the new Age of Sigmar role-playing game or the new expansions for Warhammer Fantasy Battles from Cubicle 7. Sorry, I really wanted to go just one whole episode, but apparently the universe decided that that's just not happening. One last thing before we go. While GAMA was educational, valuable, and a lot of fun, there was one part of GAMA that really wasn't fun, and that was being trapped in a hotel casino in Reno, Nevada, while I got to watch on television as Nebraska flooded. In fact, my first personal experience with the Nebraska flooding didn't happen until Saturday when I flew home from Reno and was able to capture these images from the air while I was on my flight back to Epley. Our hearts go out to everyone who was impacted by the flooding. I can't imagine the pain, loss, and hardship folks continue to face as a result of this devastating natural disaster. There are so many people who have lost everything and are in dire need of help and assistance. If you're able to, I encourage everyone watching to contribute as much as you can to flood relief efforts here in Nebraska and Iowa. You can donate to the American Red Cross anytime at www.redcross.org. Or you can donate $10 immediately by texting Red Cross to 90999. Also, because I am a U.S. Air Force veteran, and I know that some of our regular customers and gamers are military members who are directly affected by the flooding at Offutt, you'll find a link in the description below to the Air Force Chaplain Corps Offutt Air Force Base Flood Relief Drive. For other opportunities to help, you'll find in the description below links to a page at WOWT.com where you can find information to donate to not only the American Red Cross, but the Salvation Army, the Nebraska Humane Society, and the Nebraska Farm Bureau. You'll also find a link to pages that will offer assistance to those of you directly affected by the flooding that might need help from agencies like FEMA, the Nebraska Department of Health and Human Services, or need mental health assistance. Also, because the Geek Room is part of the Omaha gaming community, and I take the word community in that very seriously, I wanted to let you know that you can drop off money and relief supplies at Sparta Games on 108th and Maple during their normal business hours. On April 6th from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., the game shop will be having a silent auction for flood relief at their Bellevue location. You can bid on rare and hard to find out-of-print games for your games library, and all of the proceeds will be donated to flood relief. There is a link in the description below to the information about the game shop's silent auction. This is a great way for you to get some great games and donate to flood relief at the same time, and we certainly encourage everyone who can to go and contribute. Well, that's it for this episode of Geek Room Update. Again, if you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to like and subscribe. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We'll see you here again in 2 weeks when we will have some more great game news for you and in-store events coming to the Geek Room. But until then, everybody stay safe, stay strong, and happy gaming, everyone.